place there where you can go learn the English language and, do all British-related stuff. I don't believe that this is done by accident. They know what they're doing. They like to taunt, they like to troll, they like to disrupt, they like to provoke, they like to destabilise. It's all a game of psychological warfare, amongst other things. So what happens next? Well, let's speak to Cormac Smith, who's a former advisor to the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry. Cormac, the second biggest attack of the war, once again, aimed right into the heart of Kyiv and also into the EU quarter, if you will, where the EU have their offices, the British Council have their offices. I mean, Putin is essentially playing a big game here, isn't he?
Good morning. Look, you're absolutely correct that this was not by accident. A number of the missiles used in this attack were precision munitions. So I'm almost certain it was deliberate that both the British Council and the EU mission were hit. I think what this tells us is the absolute disdain which Putin and the Kremlin hold Western democracies, hold Keir Starmer, hold Emmanuel Macron, hold other EU leaders and other European leaders. Could I say there's three lessons I think we finally need to take out of this attack? And the first one is that diplomacy simply does not work with Russia. Russia only understands strength. The second is our leaders are slow learners, and I include Keir Starmer in that. Keir Starmer talked about Putin sabotaging peace. Putin sabotaged peace over 3.5 years ago on the 24th of February, 2022. And Mark Rutte made some similar ridiculous statements about we need to stop being naive about Putin and the Kremlin's intents. It's time to wake up. And the third thing I have got to say, Trump has zero credibility. We can forget about his boasts to bring peace and his vaunted relationship with Vladimir Putin. But we must finally wake up to these lessons.
Well, if we wake up to these lessons, what should our response be? Because the thing is about Putin, he knows what he's doing. He's there provocatively going, come on, have a go if you think you're hard enough. I'm not going to put bombs on your soil, but I'm going to bomb your buildings in Ukraine. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? And the problem is with Europe is, it seems to me, we don't know what we're going to do about it.
Well, a good friend of mine and a colleague, a former colonel in the British Army, said in an interview only yesterday, it's always a dollar too little and a dollar too late. I've been saying since before the full-scale invasion, I coined a soundbite as a communicator. I love my soundbites. Arm Ukraine to the teeth and sanction Russia back to the Stone Age. We've not done that. We've always given Ukraine less than they need. And we've always given it to them slowly, and we've tended to give it to them with handcuffs on, and the sanctions are still not going far enough, although we do know now that the Russian economy is creaking. I am afraid to those who would say that we must persist with diplomacy, that is not an answer. We have a threat which can only be dealt with by force. And I would remind our viewers that it was the last Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Oleksiy Reznikov, who said 2 months in December 21, he said to the world in a CNN interview, he said, we don't need or want your boots on the ground. Just give us the weapons we need and we'll do our own fighting. We still have not given Ukraine everything they need, Alex.
I always find it remarkable when I hear European leaders say, we must apply stricter sanctions to Russia. I'm like, hold on, you're telling me that lever can still be pulled a little bit further and a little bit further and a little bit further. It's like flying towards a motorway collision and sort of, looking at your handbrake for 10 minutes before you decide to pull it.
We still haven't taken all Russian banks out of SWIFT. We still haven't gone after the shadow fleet of nearly 1,400 oil tankers, which allows Russia to continue exporting oil, which is basically their only source of income, and it's how they are funding their war, still earning in the region of between 20 and 30 billion dollars per month, despite sanctions. Now, we know we can go further on sanctions, but we also need to arm Ukraine better and faster. Now, this is happening. What is absolutely clear, despite the aspirations and the hopes of some earlier this year with Donald Trump's various peace proposals, is this war is not going to end anytime soon, because the Russians will only accept a complete capitulation of Ukraine. And I never tire of reminding people what a very good friend and a senior Ukrainian diplomat said to me in the early days of the war. He said, Cormac, it's very simple. If Russia stops fighting, there will be no war. If Ukraine stops fighting, there will be no Ukraine. And Vladimir Putin has told us, and continuously, that what he aims to do is to wipe Ukraine and Ukrainian identity off the face of the map. He considers it a false country, and he has no compunction with wiping out tens of thousands, as he did in one city, Mariupol, alone in the early days of the war. He has no compunction with wiping out tens of thousands of innocent civilians to do that. We need to wake up, and we're still not. Nearly 4 years in, as I said, our leaders, and I include Keir Starmer, and I include Macron, and I include the new German Chancellor Merz, and I include Mark Rutte in this. They're slow learners. It's past time for words.
They're pathetic. They're from a generation of European leaders that are just weak and spineless and frankly not fit for purpose. And Putin's got the measure of the lot of them. He knows. He knows the rubbish leadership we've had in this country. And you're absolutely right. When it comes to America, America's got past form, frankly, in wading in at the last minute and claiming to have won the Second World War on behalf of everybody, but spent a damn long time ruminating over whether they wanted to come and help their Western allies. And it seems to be the same again. And problem is, the European leaders keep scuttling over to Washington going, please help, please help, please help. And in some respects, I do have some sympathy when America looks at Europe and says, well, do you know what? Before you come with the begging bowl to us, how about you learn to help yourself first? And I remember it took about 6 months for the EU to decide to even put a single sanction on Russia at the outbreak of this invasion. I remember how Germany prevented countries who wanted to sell weapons to Ukraine from either reselling things that they had given to those countries, or even allowing them to cross German airspace. I remember how tawdry and pathetic and mealy-mouthed the response was from Europe. And you're right, Cormac, nothing really seems to have changed. They talk the good talk, they wear their snappy suits, they stand on podiums in front of backdrops at summits and say, we've got to take this seriously. And it's like, well, why don't you say that to yourself in the mirror every morning? Cormac, it's fantastic catching up with you, darling. I've got to let you go because we're coming to the end of the hour and I've got a hard out. But let us catch up on this again next week, because I think it's about time we put attention back on Ukraine and didn't get Ukraine fatigue, because it is so vitally important to the security of our continent.